Absolution was produced by Paul Reeves, John Cornfield and Rich Costey in Cello Studios, LA.
I met them in May 2004 when they went to LA to record what was going to be Absolution. That was the first time I actually ever met them. I was sent out to do a cover feature for Kerrang on sort of the making of Absolution, and you know, this was going to be Muse's next step into being, you know, an international sort of super band. So I met them there, saw them doing the album, and you know, did an interview over the course of 2 or 3 days, I think it was. You
often get quite a lot of interesting bands recording at Cello Studios. I mean, it's right on Sunset Boulevard, so it's next to all those famous places, you know, the Whiskey, Viper Rooms, the Roxy. But actually it's quite a low-key place, it's quite understated.
But they were doing sort of the final mixes with Rich Costey, who produced the album, and yeah, that was all. That was where it was all centred around. We sort of went down to the studio, and we were actually staying in the same hotel as them, and they'd been at this hotel in the Standard for an entire month. It's like walking into a fashion magazine spread, so yeah, it really is quite a crazy place. But they had been in apartments previously, and they'd gotten Dom apparently, the drummer, had wanted more nightlife, so they moved. So they weren't very far from the studio. It was only like a 5-minute drive. Yeah. There wasn't much following to be done because they basically were in the studio. I mean, it was very much like visiting someone at work, you know, they were very much focused on the record because it was in its final mixing stages. So, you know, it was a pretty important time.
Cello Studios is actually a very modest place, and it doesn't have all the trappings of rock and rollism. It doesn't have the latest gadgets, etc. It's just a very modest, relaxed place in which to spend a lot of time. Important when you're recording.
I was sent out there to try and dish the dirt on this band who previously had garnered quite a reputation for being, you know, real hellraisers and bon viveurs. And we got there and, you know, Matt was on, like, you know, water. They weren't drinking. They were sort of like, they'd go down to the studio, they'd maybe go out. I said to them, so have you been going out much at all? And they were like, I think we've been out once or so.
And in LA, well, it's very easy to get into that late night scene in LA. Endless excellent bands playing. It's a bit of a mecca for rock and metal especially.
I mean, they do like to party, but I think they know when to and when not to. And I mean, he said there's no point in me getting drunk because it'll just wreck my voice completely. But when we went down to the studio, they let us hear 5 tracks that were actually finished, and they wouldn't let us hear anything else because it wasn't finished. So you know, they wanted us to hear the finished product. I played table tennis with him after the interview, which again was good. You know, he was like, you know, there was a table tennis table in the bar area of the Standard, and he was like, do you want a game? I'm like, I can't believe this. I'm playing table tennis with that. But that was fun, and he thrashed me. So.
In the run-up to releasing the 3rd album, Muse released a downloadable single called Stockholm Syndrome. In addition, they played several club dates to gear up for a big arena tour, making Exeter the last stop.
A month later, they played a special set of promotional gigs, which were basically, they were sort of gearing up for this massive, massive arena tour, and they didn't want to do a lot of press because they were too stressed out with getting everything right. So they did this string of club dates where they would do all their press there, and so sort of reward the fans who, you know, they've long since gone away from such venues, but they basically played these little shows. I met them after that, and that was actually one of the best shows I saw them do in this time. It was in the Islington Academy, which is pretty small for them, and it was amazing to see. I was like that close up, and I could really see them playing, and it was like, it's real.
So here we have Muse. They've been on this great world tour. The sound stages of the world have been played. They've played in every country twice, and where do they end it? Their grand finale is to play the Exeter West Point bloody arena.
Because I went to see them play in Exeter a year ago, and they made the Exeter sort of tour date the last on their tour before, and they just sort of done a round the world tour. So it obviously meant a lot to them.
I mean, imagine what it must have been like for the local fans down there.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about how, you know, in the press, I don't know that Matt Bellamy's necessarily the most popular kind of person. People kind of perceive him as being this real arrogant sort of upstart. And I went with the idea of thinking that, oh, you know, he's probably going to, I mean, you know, they are a fantastic band, but, you know, sometimes you think people are not necessarily, you know, so nice. And I met them and I was utterly stunned at a band that have really done quite a lot to certainly change the course of British music. How down to earth they were, and how sort of, you know, just normal, if you want a better expression. And particularly Matt, you know, who I expected to be some kind of like really kind of nerdy, sort of aloof kind of person. He was, you know, fascinating guy to talk to. You know, he was really interested in things, and it's actually rare when you interview bands that get past a certain point that they really have too much to say. They're more sort of, they become quite blasé about it. But he was, you know, he was kind of getting used to sort of, you know, back into rock metal work, because they'd had a few months off in between Origin of Symmetry and Absolution. So he was kind of getting back into the mode of it, and so he was still kind of, he actually says to me, he said, "You've actually caught me at quite an honest period, because, you know, I'm quite nervous about everything." So to hear that from somebody who, you know, a few months previously I'd seen like throwing his guitar around his head like Hendrix, and hearing him just kind of like, you know, talk like that was quite, you know, it's quite exciting, really.
Absolution was finally released in 2003, selling 73,000 copies in just 1 week. The album proved to be different from the other two, fusing elements of classical and rock music.
Although you can see so many influences in the music, to me it all comes together in Absolution. It's an amazing record, and it just sticks around in your head.
Looking back at Origin of Symmetry, there was a lot of, it seemed to be quite an experimentative album. There was a lot of new, it was so different from showbiz, but there were certain bits that seemed a bit unfocused, whereas you couldn't say that about Absolution.
This constant melding of various influences defined their style and separated them from the rest of the rock world.
Yeah, we've always kind of like mixed up bits of electronica, bits of like classical music, bits of rock music, and we've always tried to mix things together and see what happens, really, you know. So
I think all I can say about Muse is they had their own style. There was no, you know, they took so many different things from so many different angles.
Do you have any people who have influenced you,
I mean, loads of stuff really, from Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, through to early electronic music, bands like Dinosaur Jr., Smashing Pumpkins, also a lot of jazz, piano music in general, yeah.
Muse's style of music is very individual now. It certainly has changed. Although you can see so many influences in their music and melded them together so well, it has just created something new. You
find with most bands, like the music they play and the music they listen to are totally different things. For example, Chris and his obsession for status quo. He's really into status quo, and he's, you know, and I believe when he was, I'm sure he's admitted it to. I think he's even admitted on an interview that, like, you know, he went and saw them sound check, and I think he even played guitar for them in a sound check because. They didn't, you know, the guitarist wasn't there, you know, and he knew all the songs. I mean, you know, because he is that good a musician.
Most rock bands do tend to get a little bit stale. It's quite common. You've done the tours, you've done a few albums, you've done endless magazine interviews, lots of press, and you get a little bit tired, or you get a little bit lazy, and you just coast along for a bit. Muse, no way. These guys have only just begun.
Even though a lot of people find their music hard to listen to, if you listen to it carefully, you can actually get there are some catchy tunes in there.
The best thing about them is they're incredibly creative, they're incredibly sort of dramatic, they're very, very colourful. They do all these really complicated things, and yet at the end of the road there's all these songs that you can sing along to as well. And that's a far harder a thing to pull off.
It's like an incredible, rich 100-track recording, very complex, but you can still hum it.
In 2003, shortly after the European release of the album, Muse won the Q Innovation Award. Absolution also topped the charts in the UK. They then went on to win Best British Rock Indie Band at the Interactive Music Awards.
Congratulations, brilliant album, #1.
Cool.
But explain explain what this award is about?
It's kind of like, I think it's it's voted for by producers, so I don't know, it's like an innovation in music. I mean, what does that mean?
Music and sound. Well, I think, you know,
creating new ideas or new soundscapes or whatever. I don't know.
Exactly. I think it's, you know, it's kind of about experimenting with ideas in music and trying things out, not being afraid to try things out. And I think, you know, we've always tried to try new things for ourselves and, you know, push ourselves musically. So I think it's kind of about that.
This we had like loads of ideas really, and we don't really have a. You try and have a concept or like an idea, but it just turns to